What is happening?
Broadcasting live from the Zimmer Communications World Headquarters.
Great news for the American people.
This is Wake Up Mid-Missouri with Branden Rathert, featuring Stephanie Bell, News Director Brian Houseworth, John Marsh, and Hannah, the producer.
This is why we listen to you.
Get ready, pal.
And now, here's your host, Branden Rathert.
8 Republican candidates have qualified and have chosen to be here on our debate stage tonight. They are here to lay out their vision for America, the battle for the GOP nomination.
Let's get ready to rumble! Get ready to rumble!
So, every Friday, Feel Good Friday, 8:35, we pick winners and losers of the week. And this morning, we are picking winners and losers of the debate. Is it close for you, or is there a clear, if we're picking winners and losers of the debate, is there a clear-cut winner in your mind, Hannah?
I would think so.
All right.
Yeah.
Marsh, what about you?
Yeah.
Yeah? All right.
So.
Me too. Clear-cut winner, man. This is real easy. Stephanie Bell, she's here at 6:35. She was there last night. I am anxious to hear what she has to say. Not just her takeaway from the debate, but maybe some of the interesting things she uncovered behind the scenes. We are doing that also. 7:35, MODOT Central District Engineer Marchelle Watkins. She's going to be joining us, John. Because I think really the biggest thing we want to know about, how much talks were there about fixing, doing something other than the tri-level in Jefferson City? What, if anything, could be done to fix that? And I'm wondering if those conversations have been amped up now that after that massive 5+ hour traffic jam after the accident there last week, some of the things we are covering on the show.
Do you think they'll tell us if Stephanie got her wish and someone was fired?
Ms. Watkins, Stephanie Bell of Ellinger Bell requested that somebody, we don't know who, but somebody be fired. And we will say this is not about knocking MODOT. Governor Parson came on the show the very next day or a couple of days after that and said, hey, MODOT does a good job, but man, there are some things that we've got to do in the tri-level. And here's the thing: I've been on that tri-level even before this happened. I'm like, my gosh, can't we do something different? I've whined and whined about it. All right,
Your Google Maps tried to kill itself.
Oh my gosh, that was incredible. We are going to cover that. All right, Hannah, it's clear and concise for you. If there's a winner of the debate, who was it?
Vivek.
Marsh, if it's clear and cut for you, who was the winner of the debate?
Ditto. Vivek.
Brian Houseworth, if you don't want to weigh in on this.
And it's fair. It's a fair question to ask. But
Brian.
Well, let me ask you this first.
Yes.
Personally, and you don't have to answer who you think. If you want, you can. But in your mind, without saying a name, do you think it was clear cut in your mind?
I do not.
Really?
I do not. No, I don't. I thought there was a strong performance, and I mean this in all seriousness. I'm comfortable saying if I thought there was a clear winner, I would say it because it's more of analysis. I do think the clear winner is the two Fox hosts that moderated it. They did a great job, in my opinion. Now, I know Martha McCallum took some heat from the audience about that UFO question, but you know what? It's legit. It's legitimate. It's legitimate. And Governor Christie even had fun with it, but he turned serious. And but I thought they did a good job. I just wish I didn't like all the candidates interrupting each other.
By the way, right now, the New York Times, USA Today, even the leftist news publication across America agree with us this morning. Vivek Ramaswamy actually exceeded my expectations.
Great.
Because my big question on the show here yesterday, and I don't know what it was for you, would love to get your reaction, 874-9390. You can text us, 874-9390. Already got a collection of texts from Barbara, Rick, Rebecca. He exceeded my expectations. My big concern yesterday was, okay, Ramaswamy is smooth when you're interviewing him on the TV. He's great with these interviews. We saw that interaction that went viral when somebody said, well, what do you think about the transgender stuff? And he's like, I respect you, but I don't think any of the LGBTQ stuff goes together. Dudes like dudes, girls like dudes. These people want to cut their junk off. And he said that stuff doesn't go together. But he was, you know what? And I've been on this for years. He was polite. We can disagree and be polite.
Incredible speaker, and I agree that he did very well. You've talked him up for a long time, but he, in a debate with a Democrat, he would do very well, and Pence interrupted him a couple times too.
Oh,
man.
Yeah,
he did.
Pence, so, I've talked about how Pence makes me sleepy anyways every time he opens his mouth. He's just not excitable.
Mm-hmm.
He was so unlikable last night. He was a jerk.
Who was the bigger in your mind? Was it Chris Christie or Mike Pence? Chris Christie, by the way, he's off the list. We know why he's there. He's there applying for a cable job. He's just there to go after Trump because they used to be buds. Trump used to accept him under his umbrella. He doesn't anymore. And by George, Chris Christie, I'm going to get you for the rest of my life. I'm going to seek revenge on you anyway. That's all he's doing. So Christie's out immediately.
Did you hear the boos he got when they introduced each candidate?
Yes.
That was
and
very
Asa
interesting.
Hutchison, too. They booed Asa Hutchison at the beginning.
Who's sleepier, Hutchinson or Pence?
Ooh.
Yeah, right. There's a tough one. So, listen, Vivek Ramaswamy, and I wondered last night as I'm watching it, I'm a few minutes in, and afterwards I'm like, yeah, this is easy. It's Vivek Ramaswamy.
He was right out of the gate on fire.
Exceeded my expectations. The talk about the nuclear family and stuff. After the debate, and I love this because him and Nikki Haley of South Carolina, they got into it a little bit about foreign policy. He was asked about this after the debate.
My general view is that if somebody breaks your car for 25 years, you don't hand over the key to the same person. And so I view my absence of so-called foreign policy experience as a badge of honor.
You keep messing the stuff up with all of your experience in foreign policy. He says, my lack of experience in this is a badge of honor. And frankly, when you're president, you're not the one. You have a staff of people to figure these things out. But I just thought it was a really, really good answer. Yeah, it's easy, man. It's Vivek. Now, I don't know if did anything change for anybody last night?
Yes. So Vivek was my number one. DeSantis was my number two.
Who?
Exactly. He laid an egg last night, I thought. I didn't feel like he answered any of the questions that were asked of him. I felt like he just was dodging everything. I just wasn't impressed at all.
And he's kind of always got this look. Like if you're watching.
You know who the real winner was?
Who's that?
The former president.
So I want to show
74 million views with his X Twitter feed with Tucker.
He's
74 million views.
He's very popular with the base. There is no question.
And I want to show you something for proof. I don't know if you can see it. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, Wake Up Mid-Missouri on Facebook page, yesterday morning, 6:53, I wrote down my winner of who the debate was going to be. And who you see this, John? You see who I wrote down yesterday morning at 6:53?
I think it starts with a T and ends with a rump.
That was yesterday morning. See, I'm like, Trump wins, and that's, yeah.
You know who's another winner? Stephanie Bell, because she correctly predicted that Nikki Haley would be wearing white. We even got a text last night at 874-9390 from a Wake Up family member who was like, how did she know?
Yeah.
And then all the dudes wore the exact same outfit, which was funny, too.
Blue suit, reddish tie.
Yeah.
I think there's one other thing, too, that we should point out about this debate. It's unlike any of the others, because that's probably the biggest field of debate we'll see on both sides of the aisle.
Hopefully.
I mean, you're right, Hannah. I mean, you could see it whittled down, but I mean, the point is, in the general election, you're going to get, maybe a third-party candidate up there. I don't know. We'll have to see, but it'll be whoever the Democrat and Republican is. But when you have that many candidates on stage at one time, two moderators, and then I don't know if people caught it, Martha McCallum's microphone went out. They had to actually bring somebody out to get her a microphone. It's hard to get all those things in, but I thought they did the best they could. Those time limits are very difficult, and almost all of them violated that, too, as well, which always happens.
With the time limits, I thought it was ironic that at the very end, they were doing a lightning round. And I think every single candidate gave their longest answer of the night during this lightning round.
So Tim Scott and Nikki Haley, and I really like Tim Scott, and I think there's an interesting reason. Here's one of the reasons I wish it would be Tim Scott. I wish he would be the eventual. I mean, a lot of them, they're fine. Listen, Vivek, Nikki, Tim, they're all fine. But here's the thing. If Tim Scott became the nominee, because look at what progressives do. Well, if you don't do this, then you're racist. If you don't have black friends in your life, you're racist. If you don't denounce racism, you're racist. So then let's put Tim Scott forward. Let's make him the GOP nominee. And every single black or white or whatever color you want to call human beings, whatever those human beings that talk about racism who don't vote for Tim Scott, then what do we do, John? We go to them and say, You didn't vote for the black guy.
How dare you?
You are a racist. You are a racist. That's well, Tim Scott. He's got he's got fine political chops. I think he would be good too. But we could tell these hypocrites, you didn't vote for the black guy, or for that matter, the Indian guy. You are a racist. I would love to do that, to show them, to highlight their hypocrisy. And we heard a lot of hypocrisy, by the way. Post-debate stuff was pretty interesting, too.
Two things. I thought it was funny. A couple of the candidates said that they were calling out other candidates for pre-rehearsed speeches.
As they were reading from the cue cards.
Yes, they all did it.
You caught it, man.
Yeah, they all did it.
So
I also saw a tweet that said Vivek is just the new, skinnier, browner version of Trump.
Text Barbara 874-9390 was Dog and Pony Show. Rick, Trump is winning without being there. Rebecca says pretty entertaining. Tim Scott, and I thought this was pretty interesting when we consider the story about that Kansas newspaper that was raided by a local police department.
This DOJ uses their power, uses their authority, not just against political opponents, but against conservatives.
And that's important because what do we talk when we talk about the Department of Justice, FBI, IRS going after Republicans and conservatives? We say, here's why that matters. This can happen on a smaller, more confined local level. And with that raid on that newspaper in Kansas where the cops went in because there may have potentially been some unsavory truths coming out about the chief and things like that, and the way they raided that 98-year-old woman's home and what they did in that home, that's why those things matter. That happened in a county in Kansas. I
guess they don't have the First Amendment in Kansas, so, right?
Right. Not in that town. That's why these things matter. They aren't complaining talking points. The reality is these kinds of things, they can come home and they can hit you. And I will say, I thought Pence had an interesting response last night. One of the questions that he was asked last night.
Should presidents have to pass a mental and physical test in order to serve Vice President Pence?
So he was asked, do you think president needs, and this is obviously in reference to Mr. Joe Biden, who is very old. Not only, it's not just about Joe's age, it's just about the lack of mental acuity, the lack of ability to really do anything substantial. So how did he answer that question? That's coming up. We'll do that in the Daily DC Rundown. Also, the next big political event on TV today, Trump.
in order to serve Vice President Pence.
So, interesting moment when Martha McCallum asked Mike Pence, former vice president, about that because he got some good laughs.
It might be a good idea to have everybody in Washington, D.C. pass a mental.
That was pretty funny. That was a good answer from an otherwise milquetoast dude in Mike Pence. 5 seconds later, then he said this.
We don't need a president who's too old, and we don't need a president who's too young.
And that elicited boos, by the way. 8 seconds, man. Marsh, he had the audience for like 8 seconds. He had them. Yes, everybody should get this test. We don't need a president who, and he's laughing. And, you know, whenever you get a response to something you do, if you're on a stage or if you're doing a radio show and people respond in a favorable way, what do you do when somebody's responding to what it is that you're doing? You continue to do a good job and you keep putting out good stuff. But then when you say something like that and the crowd turns on you, boom, man, that hurts. That's getting us into today's Daily DC Rundown. We'll continue with highlights. Matter of fact, coming up here less than 10 minutes from now, Stephanie Bell was there, live report. She is still in Wisconsin this morning. We will be checking in with her. Meanwhile, the next big thing, John, Donald Trump, set to surrender. Today, 2 authorities in Georgia on charges that he schemed to overturn the 2020 election in that state. Booking process, everybody, the folks on the left, they're excited. Oh, my gosh, we're going to see the first mugshot of a former American president. Trump's arrival follows the presidential debate featuring his leading rivals for the 2024 Republican nomination, a contest in which he remains the leading candidate despite accelerating legal troubles. Now, the other thing that we have noticed, even prior to the debate, polls, for what polling is worth, continue to show Vivek and Ron DeSantis, basically. So basically, it's Trump, it's DeSantis. DeSantis had been the only candidate getting double-digit numbers in the poll while still trailing by a massive amount. But then there have been a couple of polls that are starting to show that Ramaswamy is starting to occasionally get some double-digit support. So this Fulton County prosecution, 4th criminal case against Trump, you know the rest. We don't need to continue there. Meanwhile, Russian mercenary chief Yevgeny Prigozhin, top officers of his private military company, presumed dead in a plane crash, widely seen as an assassination. This only 2 months after they staged a mutiny that dented Vladimir Putin's authority. Russia's Civil Aviation Agency said that Prigozhin and 6 top lieutenants were on a business jet that crashed Wednesday, soon after taking off from Moscow. U.S. and other Western officials long expected Putin to go after Prigozhin, despite promising to drop charges in a deal that ended the June 23rd, 24th mutiny. President Biden saying, I don't know for a fact what happened, but whatever did happen, I'm not surprised. What a great answer to something you don't have a solid stance on. I'm not surprised. I don't know for a fact it happened, but I'm not surprised if it did. Supporters of Prigozhin claimed the plane was deliberately downed. And check this out. And I'm bringing this up because following the post-debate stuff, and I hope you do this. So as soon as the debate is over, I turn off the TV. I don't need to hear what the talking heads on the TV are telling me what they think they saw.
And it's your bedtime.
Yeah, and it's that's right. Yeah. I'm done. I'm a dude.
I fell asleep before it was over.
Hey, listen, I'm a guy. When I'm done. But there was, and specifically, and we're going to hear some of this audio from a DNC surrogate who was talking about the economy is good. Just look at how many people are moving into cities run by Democrat mayors. And I'm like, whoa. The Times magazine has done extensive stories on people actually doing the opposite. They're leaving places like San Francisco, where tensions flared as lawyers for San Francisco argued in appellate court that the city can no longer maintain safe, clean streets while trying to get homeless people indoors. This because of progressive policies.
DeSantis.
Next, entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy.
Former Vice President Mike Pence.
Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley.
Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie.
South Carolina Senator Tim Scott.
Former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson.
And North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum.
All right, one of those people you heard booing Chris Christie was Stephanie Bell. She was at the debate last night. We welcome her. Was that you, Boo? Were you one of the folks booing Chris Christie, Steph?
I wasn't booing in the first few minutes, but there was definitely some booing throughout the night from me as well.
Yeah, how about that? Welcome to the show. This is Wake Up Mid-Missouri. I'm Branden Rathert. John Marsh, producer Hannah is here. Stephanie Bell's joining us. Coming up about an hour from now, MODOT joins us. Central District Engineer Marchelle Watkins talking about that tri-level. And I think, John, in my mind, two big questions on this. How much talk was taking place prior to the big traffic jam last week in which Stephanie called for somebody? She didn't know who, but somebody needs to be fired. How much talk was happening about the tri-level prior to that, and then how much has been happening now after the massive traffic jam last week? That's one of the things coming up this morning. Eli Yokely, Morning Consult, political consultant, and happens to be a Mizzou grad, now plies his trade in D.C. He watched the debate last night, so we'll get some perspective on a national level, but right now I want to get some perspective from somebody who lives here with us in mid-Missouri. Stephanie Bell, Wake Up Mid-Missouri. So we heard the applause-o-meter. I was surprised that Ron DeSantis got such a loud cheering there from the folks in the crowd. Was not surprised by the reaction to Chris Christie. Your big takeaway from the debate last night. I don't know if you've been able to listen to the show on our apps, which you can download. Our apps are new and updated, and they are awesome, man. And Hannah will fact check me on that statement.
They're pretty cool, if I do say so myself.
Because Hannah's the one who designed them. There's no confirmation bias here. It's just a fact check. So I don't know if you've been listening on the app this morning, staff. Your big takeaway from the debate last night. We're all in agreement. Clear-cut winner without saying the name. We're clear-cut on this. What's your big takeaway?
Really? I have not listened yet this morning. I'm sorry. We were... It was a really long evening.
We know that. But let me ask you this: my
takeaway. I stood up, and there were two gentlemen behind me. I didn't know them, and one guy, the first guy, goes, "Well, that wasn't what I expected," and the second guy goes, "Aye," at the very end, and I thought that was a lot of folks' takeaway. It was much more A, entertaining, but B, I think contentious than a lot of people had anticipated. And I think that's what the initial reaction from him was. And the other, I think a lot of people wanted to walk away with a clear-cut winner. I might disagree with you. From texts and from talking to people, I think people are still very divided. I think there's a clear cut that maybe Asa Hutchinson is not going to make the cut. I will say that much.
And we knew that going in, I think. But so this is like NHL hockey. So many people aren't fans of NHL hockey. And then they go to a game and they have a different perspective. So our perspective from having watched and listened here on the radio station, Steph, we're pretty clear-cut in who we think won. But you were, in effect, at the game. You have a different take. And our clear-cut consensus this morning here on the show, it was Vivek Ramaswamy that won. But you have a different take. What's your take from having been there?
I think I think it comes down to two people. I think Vivek Ramaswamy and DeSantis. And talking with some folks who also were in attendance at the night, at the event, all DeSantis needed to do was not have a bad night. And, he was just middle of the road. He didn't make any mistakes. He's kind of you got what you expected. And that's enough to keep him as the leader in the polls. And that's a lot of what I heard yesterday. He didn't have there were no super high highs, but there also weren't any low lows. And I would agree. I enjoyed a lot of what Vivek Ramaswamy had to say, but I will say people are very divided on him. You either loved him or you hated him. And I only saw kind of a half standing ovation all night from anybody. And it was when Nikki Haley told him that Vivek doesn't have any foreign policy experience, and it shows. And I might have been in like a Nikki Haley cheering section. I'm not quite sure. but there were definitely folks standing up and cheering at that point. So
Stephanie Bell of Wake Up Mid-Missouri joins us live from Wisconsin, where she is covering the debate for us.
Steph, before we get into questioning and getting more analysis, you nailed it when you said that Nikki Haley was going to wear white.
I did. She had kind of like blue tweed, but I was so excited. I was texting Hannah, and I said, I totally called it. She looked stunning and beautiful. And from where I was sitting, you could see Doug Burgum appeared to be wearing a boot. I don't know if you guys could see a little bit better on TV, but I think he handled that as well. My other favorite moment, and even though Chris Christie caught some hate there in the beginning, I think he masterfully handed the UFO question. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
It was well done. It was one of my favorite moments of the night.
I want to ask you this because obviously there's a bunch of folks listening to Wake Up Mid-Missouri this morning that have never attended a debate. You've watched debates on TV, and now you have personally been to one. Is it anything different being there, like a different takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, it was fun to hear, seeing the energy. I think the one misstep that I saw last night that I'm not sure you could really understand fully if you weren't attending is I think Vivek Ramaswamy's one mistake was maybe he misread the audience a bit. Now, he got some boos later in the evening, but if you know who's there, right? The RNC is running it, so you have a lot of RNC diehards. So when he went to criticize basically everyone standing on the stage, well, each candidate had people in the audience. And so then the boos were so loud because he criticized literally everybody. And so I think, if I were to give him advice in the future, it would be, if you're standing on a stage full of other Republicans, take a shot at one or two people. But if you criticize them all together, you're going to get some loud boos. And I think there are people probably really happy that he got booed so loudly because he's kind of running as that outsider.
Steph Bell, live from Wisconsin this morning, covering the last night's debate.
Steph, who do you think was a big loser?
The one person that I think underperformed was Tim Scott. And it made me sad. I've never seen him live in person. I really thought I was excited to see him, and I thought he was one that might be the underdog and outshine a whole bunch of people. And so, definitely, I think Tim Scott underperformed. I think we already knew Asa Hutchinson was a loser. I actually kind of liked some of Doug Burgum's answers. I don't think he's going anywhere, but he was personable, and some of his things on states' rights, I think I really appreciated.
And I did, his campaign has a little bit of a sense of humor. Doug Burgum, the night prior to the debate, he's playing basketball with some of his campaign staff and apparently hurts himself, has to go to the ER. And the campaign, quick thinking on their feet, they said, you remember, Marsh, the old classic Jordan poster, the Nike emblem of Jordan and the ball flying through the air just about.
Oh, sure. The classic logo thing.
They did that, but it's a dude in cowboy boots and a cowboy hat. I got that text from the Burgum
handing out gift cards instead of basketballs.
I love it.
Well, and Missouri had a really good showing. I didn't know before I showed up, but both Treasurer Malik and Auditor Fitzpatrick were in the crowd watching live, so it's fun to see them as well.
That's pretty cool to see. Yeah, see some of our statewide servants taking part in something like that. Stephanie Bell, anything else that you would like to add before we let you get back to your day and let you get back home to join us on a Feel Good Friday?
No, I can't wait to listen to your all's take, and then we can debate about who's up next. And I heard it's going to be even more difficult to get into the second debate, and if you can go, I would say go. It's amazing, and I'm going to be pulling all the strings I have to try to get a ticket to the second one. And I think the real question is, how many people do we think is going to make that second stage? I'm excited to talk to you guys about that as we head in that direction.
The other thing I'm wondering about, do you think anybody, I don't know, did anything change your mind last night? Any surprise, anything you go, I think a little bit differently on this now?
I think it narrowed it. I think it's down to Ramaswamy and DeSantis, honestly.
Stephanie Bell, live in Wisconsin this morning. Thank you so much. We look forward to having you hang out with us in the studio this tomorrow morning on a Feel Good Friday. 710 Eli Yokely. He's with Morning Consult, political consulting firm. He's going to give a national take. So we got the take from Stephanie Bell. Think for all three of us this morning between Hannah and Marsh, myself, watching the debate, Ramaswamy, but Stephanie with a really interesting take being there. She's like, it was okay. Speaking of some of our statewide servants, yesterday I was doing the Gary Nolan show. Happens to be my dad's favorite show. Gary Nolan is here 9 to noon. And Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft was here. And we had a little bit of towards the end, a little bit of a different conversation. And I loved it because it was very personal in nature. It kind of started with politics. And then it got personal, and I appreciate when our elected servants can do those kinds of things. But not everybody was on board with our enthusiasm for the conversation that we had.
Oh, he was enthusiastic.
You're
84 points. The S&P 500 up 48. The NASDAQ higher by 215.
Guess what we do at 8:25 every morning? Morning Bell. Business news, little twist. Only Stephanie Bell can give you a look at your futures. We do it just minutes before the stock market opens. And the big story this morning in the Morning Bell at 8:25, two things. There are two things happening right now, and it hasn't happened in 20 years. There's two of them. Well, I'll give you a hint. One of them has to do with beer, and the other one might hit closer to home for you. Those stories coming up 8:25. There's Mr. John Marsh.
Good morning.
There's producer Hannah.
Yo.
I'm Branden Rathert. We all seem to be in agreement on immediately who, after watching the debate last night, who we think won, if there's a winner of the debate. Tomorrow, Feel Good Friday, we do winners and losers of the week. We're all, I think, clear-cut on this. Not even close. And folks, via text 874-9390, maybe not necessarily agreeing, and that's cool. Want to hear your thoughts. Did it change anything for you? Who was your clear-cut winner? Would love to get a text from you, 874-9390. Jay Ashcroft, Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, was on Gary Nolan's show yesterday. I was hosting the Gary Nolan show. And the Secretary of State and I, we talked about a couple of things as it relates to what's happening in the news. But then afterwards, and this was in relation to Joe Biden and those statements that he made in Hawaii this week, that people are still like, man, come on, dude, please do something. Democrats, please do something about this guy. He's so embarrassing to our country on a worldwide stage. But we were talking about Joe saying, well, I almost lost my Corvette. I almost lost my cat. And we got to talking on a political level about how it's not about you. And that's one of the things that Joe doesn't get. But then it got a little bit more on a personal level.
He is somewhat outspoken about the truth and saying, hey, do you really realize what's going on here? Then we're hiding the ball and we're not actually being polite. There's nothing wrong with speaking the truth in love. And we need more of that, and we need both more people that'll speak in love and more people that aren't afraid to speak the truth. I think the greatest calling we can have in life is not to be worried about ourselves, but to act in ways that make other people better.
That's pretty powerful.
What a cool interview.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, and we were talking about kind of the stuff along the lines of Ramaswamy, who has been one of the things I think he's doing so well is he's disagreeing with these people. The thing that went viral with that transgender activist a couple of weeks ago, he's like, hey, I disagree with you, and I'm not going to buy into your BS and call you something that you're not, but that's, that's cool, and here's why I think that. And he did it politely. But not everybody was on board with the conversation that we had, I thought, very personal in nature with the Secretary of State. Not everybody was on board.
And I don't listen to you in your show earlier in the morning either, but that's the worst interview I've ever heard for a man that's running for governor. We all know what Biden says, what he's doing.
So I want to stop here and clear. And this guy, he didn't know, and I appreciated this guy, man. He called in and said, listen, I think you suck. He called in with his... Hey, remember when for my birthday, I wanted to do a roast?
I do remember that.
Yeah, I've changed my mind on that. Yeah.
Which is exactly why we decided not to do a roast.
I actually wanted to do a charity event roast, like somewhere, not on the radio, but actually go somewhere and do it for a charity that's near and dear to my heart. So what this guy doesn't know, and it's not his fault, when you have somebody who is a current office holder, and John, you know this, you have to be careful about their coming in and their duties as, for example, Secretary of State or as a candidate for the other office they're running for, and here's why. Let's say you get somebody, let's say it's somebody who's on the city council in Jefferson City, okay? And then they're running for a different office, and you book through their city council office to get them on to talk about running for the next office. You can't do that, because, in effect, that's a use of taxpayer dollars for them to campaign for the next thing. But this guy, he didn't know that, and that's cool, and he wasn't done.
But you could have let the man talk and maybe brought up some state issues. That's the absolute worst interview I've ever heard in my life.
Go on.
Well, I mean, I don't care for you in the morning, and I miss Gary Nolan today. I look forward to hearing Ashcroft.
Yeah, and a lot of people agree with you. And he did go on, by the way. He wasn't done. So he didn't appreciate the personal nature of the conversation with Mr. Ashcroft, and I rather thought that it was interesting. As a matter of fact, had a little bit of an exchange with one of his spokespersons yesterday afterwards, and so it was just kind of interesting. And I do personally, I think those things matter to me, at least. Listen, you can go and do this, and you can talk policy and things like that, but when you have somebody like a statewide servant saying, listen, yeah, it's about serving others, and we can be polite, and not just on a political level, but in your personal life.
My biggest takeaway from the whole exchange was Branden said at the end of it, "Oh, yeah? Well, I'm going to go get my dad."
And I did. I called.
The big guy.
Right, the big guy. So the big guy. You tell your friends, man, listen, they had the big guy on the show. So we called my dad, and here's why. Trey Fauché, Mizzou College, he's president of the Mizzou College Republicans. He texted, so my dad's favorite show is the Gary Nolan Show. He's not a big fan of this show, but he loves the Gary Nolan Show. So somebody twisted my mind up yesterday. They went Leonardo DiCaprio Inception level style. They said, is the Gary Nolan Show today with Branden Rathert hosting, is it still your dad's favorite show? So then we called my dad. Man.
He was like, wow, well, let me think about that one, Branden.
He did not have an easy answer. And then at the end, so we chat for a few minutes. We're telling his story about what Bidenomics has done to him in his life as a 73-year-old man. Dude slinging smokes and 6 packs of beer at a gas station in Jefferson County, Missouri.
stage tonight. They are here to lay out their vision for America, the battle for the GOP nomination.
Let's get ready to rumble!
So we appear to be in agreement, with the exception of Stephanie Bell, who was at the debate last night. She checked in about 30 minutes ago here on the show, and she had kind of a different take than me and John and Hannah, who watched it. Hannah, in your mind, you watched it. When you're done watching it, did you go, there's a clear-cut winner?
I thought so.
Yeah. Marsh, when you were done watching it, did you go, yep, that clear-cut winner?
Yeah, because I was talking about Vivek and the way he kind of owned Chris Christie and a few other incidents.
When I got done watching, I'm like, yeah, clear-cut winner. I want to bring in Eli Yokely. Spent some time here in mid-Missouri. Mizzou grad, now applies his trade for morningconsult.com, Washington, D.C. Eli, when you got done watching it, do you go, there is a clear-cut winner here?
In like a roundabout way, maybe. The fact that somebody we've never heard of until 6 months ago was the center of attacks from a former vice president, from a former UN ambassador, from several former governor and current elected officials. Vivek Ramaswamy was the center of the show last night. And, that's a pretty good place to be whenever nobody knew who you were until February. He got a bulk of the attacks last night, and he's number 3 for the Republican nomination if you do nationwide polling. I mean, he's only gone up. At some points last night, I wondered where Ron DeSantis was. I mean, he started this year with support from like 30% of the Republican electorate, and every day it's fallen slowly but surely. We'll see what happens in the coming days. Folks, we'll see who tuned into this and see if it has a material impact on the state of the race. But the other thing here is, like, we're not talking about the guy who is running the show right now. I mean, Donald Trump has support from like 60% of the Republican electorate, and we're talking about these guys with like single digits-ish yelling at each other for 2 hours. That's not like, what are we doing here? We missed like key player in this whole contest was not there last night. But, I guess Ramaswamy maybe had one of the better performances.
By the way, Trump will be front and center today, turning himself in Georgia. Welcome into the show. This is Wake Up Mid-Missouri. There's producer Hannah.
Hello.
Mr. Marsh is here.
Good morning.
And Mr. Brian Houseworth.
It's good to see you.
My name is Branden Rathert. Our guest, morningconsult.com. It is Eli Yokely. Happen to be a Mizzou grad. In your mind, you watched, do you think anybody has changed their mind about any of the candidates after last night's debate?
I'm not sure. I mean, we'll see that in the coming days in some of our data. We're doing daily tracking on this contest. I think the thing that may move the most would just be, name ID for some of these people. A lot of these names who aren't Ron DeSantis, a lot of folks just don't know who they are yet. I'm not sure that anybody had like a significant breakout moment. Maybe Nikki Haley did when she called, whenever she told her Vivek Ramaswamy that he doesn't know what he's talking about. The challenge for her is she did it on a very divisive issue for Republican voters. She called him out on his posture on the war in Ukraine. And this is something that divides primary voters almost evenly. About half of them support giving more financial support to Ukraine. About half of them don't. It's a place where the older school Republicans, the Mike Pences of the world, want to see continued U.S. engagement. And Vivek Ramaswamy, I think, represents the sort of Trumpian new Republican posture to the world. And, she pushed back on him very hard. She's going to get a lot of cable news play today for it, probably. But the challenge is that might not be where most of the Republican electorate is.
Eli, we appreciate your great work and your great reporting, and I always enjoy it when you come back to the state, especially into rural Missouri. You do a fine job of kind of getting the feel of how people feel in rural parts, including Columbia, Jeff City, and in many rural areas as well. Looking up at that stage last night, do you have a sense if any of them multiple candidates would come to the Show Me State to campaign. Years ago, they all came through. Not as much anymore, though.
I don't know why not. It's great to get home.
Yeah.
I think that the Show Me State has shown up later in some of these contests. I think that the way presidential politics works today is you spend a lot of time in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and then you get on an airplane and go between all of the Super Tuesday states. What we have seen, especially as Missouri's lost its status as a swing state ever since like 2008 when Barack Obama almost won, which is one of the craziest things, statistics in my mind about Missouri. It has really turned into almost like a cash cow for Republican candidates. They think whenever we see Republican presidential candidates show up in Missouri, it's been to go to St. Louis and raise a lot of money. That usually comes after the nominating contests, by the way. We did see President Trump show up kind of randomly in Missouri to do some campaign events in the 2016 and 2020 race. I'm sure folks will show up at some point, but it's just not, especially in a general election, it's just not a priority state. If you're doing a delegate strategy here, trying to build up, your numbers in places where other candidates aren't competing, I think you could see some of these candidates show up. I remember, I think in 2012, Rick Santorum spent some time in Missouri and then did pretty well. And so it paid off a little bit. I mean, he never became the Republican nominee, but he got some delegates. And so I think that's what we're going to be keeping an eye on in the coming months as this campaign plays out.
It was a cool experience to be with Mr. Trump, Columbia Regional Airport 2018 when he came here that night and campaigned on behalf of Josh Hawley. That's right. Our guest this morning here on Wake Up Mid-Missouri, Eli Yokely Morning Consult, happens to be a Mizzou grad, now covers national politics. He's hanging out with us this morning on Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Eli, same question that we floated to Stephanie Bell, who's up there as we speak. Did you see any clear-cut loser in the debate?
I'm not sure that there was a loser. I mean, these debates are about do no harm, maybe get a viral moment, but otherwise do no harm. I was joking about, where was Ron DeSantis during this whole thing. But, if you're not taking the fire and letting Vivek Ramaswamy get the hits, that's not the worst place in the world to be. And you've got time as we get closer to Iowa. The other person who sort of did not seem to show a lot of face last night was Tim Scott. This is like the shadow candidate here who's kind of lurking in the back to see what happens. They've booked a lot of money on TV in the next several months heading into some of these nominating contests. I think it seems like he is trying to preserve some good graces he's got among the Republican electorate to kind of just see what happens with these other candidates who are seem to be flailing a bit, like Ron DeSantis. Nobody had a real significant breakout moment. I mean, the only person who I think probably saw his attention rise was Vivek Ramaswamy, just because he was the center of attacks. And usually you don't want to be the center of attacks, but politics is weird right now. And his posture just gave some Trumpy vibes to me, honestly. And it's the kind of thing that just may work with Republican voters. We're in sort of a dark spot right now. It's kind of almost hard to talk about some of this stuff because we're not getting data back because it happened 12 hours ago. But, my sense of the Republican electorate is what Ramaswamy did probably works with Trumpy folks. The challenge for everybody is how to engage with Trumpy folks whenever he's already on the ballot. Like, what is the point of running against somebody when you're trying to be like him? And not many people drew a line between themselves and the Republican frontrunner because of that. And so I think that's going to be a thread that we're watching in the coming weeks and months. Just if you're running against somebody who happens to be the most popular figure in your party, how do you pull support away from them? And is it going to be Chris Christie's tough talk? We'll see. I don't think Republican voters really like Trump attacks. And so maybe, the Ramaswamys of the world or the Ron DeSantis holding back and watching some of this Trump drama play out to see if the Republicans are going to be looking for a fallback. maybe that will be the tack that pays off to come next year.
As a matter of fact, Hannah, so there's somebody had described Vivek Ramaswamy as a brown, skinnier Donald J. Trump. Our guest, Eli Yokely Morning Consult, following the thing last night. I want to ask you this before we let you go. There was that moment they asked, would they support Trump if he's the nominee, and everybody six of the folks clearly raised their hand. One dude clearly did not raise his hand. And then there was the one guy who kind of raised his finger and then later said, well, I was just raising my finger to say no. Chris Christie was trying to waffle. You saw that? He was waffling, I think.
Who knows? I mean, it seems like Chris Christie is the kind of person who would stick his hand up and get himself called on out of the moderator's confusion and take the mic. That might be what happened. I think the question was about his legal stuff, and if Trump was convicted, do you think he should still be the nominee? And we did some interesting testing on this actually, and we asked Republican primary voters if they'd still be willing to vote for Trump if he were convicted, sentenced, or imprisoned. And it's like 3 in 5 Republican primary voters say they would even support Trump if he was convicted, if he was imprisoned. So, that is a very solid base of folks who aren't really moving on this guy. Roughly 4 in 5 Trump voters said that they would support him if he was behind bars. And so, we're going to see the president head to literally be behind bars for a minute today in Fulton County. His legal stuff's going to continue playing out, but he's got a solid base of support as he goes through this. A lot of these Republican voters think this is political persecution. I think that there is a good base of evidence the special counsel has. I think that Fani Willis has some pretty solid evidence that the American people are going to see, and probably get to see some of it on TV, which matters because that's how the American people consume a lot of information.
Yeah.
And
Eli, I'm running out on time here. I've got to get to 7:25. Otherwise, producer Hannah's going to kick my tail end. Eli Yokely, Morning Consult. Man, we appreciate your perspective on things this morning.
Yep, anytime. Thanks,
we'll
guys.
see you next time. Coming up, 7:25-ish, we are going to be doing What's Hot with Hannah.
What do Nicki Minaj and this local woman have in common?
Nicki Minaj and fish, which means it's
7:25.
time
Barely.
for What's Hot with Hannah.
Barely. You barely got it by like 10 seconds, but it's a gold star nonetheless. Now, Stephanie sent us a text yesterday. Brandon, did you see what it said?
I did not.
I didn't figure you did. John, did you see this text?
I guess I missed that one.
Stephanie kind of got in some hot water on Twitter. And the whole thing's so ridiculous. Nicki Minaj, the rapper, singer, whatever you want to call her, put out a tweet saying that there was a warrant issued for a lady named Stephanie Bell.
Oh.
And that basically it's one of those I will find you type of things. This Stephanie Bell allegedly was calling Department of Health or DCFS on Nicki Minaj, and they were showing up to do welfare checks on her kids. And I guess when you make a fake claim, like, it's illegal. Go figure.
Good work. And that's just with an ag degree. That's not even with a law degree.
Right.
Hannah has deduced this.
So essentially what happened is Nicki Minaj's fans went to the little search bar on Twitter and typed in Stephanie Bell. And our Stephanie Bell must have been the first name that popped up because they came after our Stephanie.
Oh.
Our Stephanie. Steph had posted a photo of her media credentials, like the plastic badge you get from the debate last night. And in the comments, people were coming for her, saying, you know, how dare you call DCFS on Nicki Minaj and basically, you know, tell us where you're at. We're going to pull up and beat you up type of things.
Wow.
Boy, they don't know who they're messing with, do they?
They don't. Eventually, a couple of the fans caught on, and they were in the comments section also going, hey, guys, like, it's the wrong Stephanie. Like, leave this poor woman alone.
She's from Ashland, Missouri, you know, right? She's not a big town. She's not from a big town, man.
And she's an attorney.
She'll land you in the courtroom. You keep messing with her.
Yeah, so finally the fans caught on, but for a hot minute there, Stephanie said her Twitter was blowing up. If you want to go check it out, all of that is still up on her Twitter page. She is Stephanie S. Bell on Twitter, and you can kind of scroll down a little bit and watch all of the chaos unfold. It's pretty entertaining.
Man, how about that? Stephanie Bell from Ashland, Missouri, getting caught up in a Twitter battle.
John Combest, friend of the show, he tweeted, and I don't know how, if he just had this in his back pocket waiting for a good time to use it, but he went to one of the Wake Up in Missouri video feeds where Stephanie had been doing her makeup, and he clipped her doing her contour, which is where she draws like the dark brown lines on her face. And he retweeted that and said, when they come for another Stephanie Bell, but you got the war paint ready just in case.
Oh, man.
So I thought John Combest won for top troll on that one.
John Combest.
good.
Yeah, he's good. He has a website. I remember like the Drudge Report, an aggregate of national stories. And it used to be more political in nature, frankly, than what it is now. But John Combest, johncombest.com, it's the same thing, but it's Missouri political stuff. It is a really good website.
Keep left. Use the left lane to keep left. Keep left. Keep right at the fork.
That's my GPS. That's my the Google on my phone trying to take me through the tri-level on the map. I have for years. I've been encouraging people, if you can, for the fun of it, put GPS maps on and go through that tri-level, especially coming from Columbia into Jefferson City. It really caught my attention when I have new people coming into Jefferson City, and I tell them, like, hey, you got to be careful through that thing, man. It will throw you off, and it's and if you know it, it's great. But when you don't know the tri-level, it can be an unsettling experience. And then obviously last week, giant traffic, 5 hours. Because of an accident there in the tri-level area. I want to bring in MODOT Central District Engineer Marchelle Watkins. Welcome into the show this morning. I wanted to ask you first, prior to Tuesday, had there been talks in place already to try to do something with the tri-level there?
Yes, the tri-level has been identified as a transportation need for quite some time, and it has been in a lot more discussions with local leaders in recent years.
All right. And then after that, after the thing on Tuesday, as a matter of fact, Governor Parson came on the show. We asked him about it, and he said, yeah, let's do something here. Have talks amped up at all since then?
I don't know that they've amped up because they have been pretty heavy recently. We are in the process at MODOT of updating our high priority unfunded needs list. And it is actually out on our website now for public comment through the end of the month. And so, there's an opportunity to weigh in on that need. But that need is identified on Tier 2 of that document.
Okay, so what is, just a second, what is, I don't know what that means. I'm guessing my audience doesn't. Can you kind of simplify that for a layman like me? Thank you.
So we have Tier 1 that are those needs that could be delivered in the next 5 years if we had additional funding. Tier 2 are ones that could be delivered past that 5-year horizon, and as is Tier 3. We developed this list in working with local planning leaders throughout the state. We look to them to provide to us what their highest priority needs are, and then we collectively within the Central District meet with our partners to prioritize these as you see them on the list that's out on our website today. So the tri-level is on Tier 2, meaning that if we got ready today, it would be outside of the 5-year horizon to be able to deliver. But I think the big thing is, it's in the title. It's unfunded. We don't have funds for that yet. But this document serves as a foundational document when we do develop our 5-year construction program. So we look to this document. We look to our asset management plan. What do we have to do to keep our roads and bridges in good condition? So resurfacing and bridge needs. And we also look at our strategic highway safety plan. What are those things that we need to be doing, projects that need to be done to make our system safer for drivers?
Marchelle, I appreciate you coming on to join us. You always do a very accessible. We appreciate that. The Missouri's sitting on a record surplus right now, and I know you don't have anything to do on the policy side, but, the governor was very clear. Brandon's absolutely right. The governor did not mince words. He said flat out on this show, MODOT should consider redesigning that interchange. That's the first sitting governor I've ever heard say that. So let's just take the politics out of it, money, hypothetical situation. If you could fix this thing right now, how much money would it take? And what do you envision to need to be done to fix it? Because a lot of it doesn't even work anymore.
Well, the location would have to be studied in detail, right? So we would have to do a planning study there. But we estimate in the high priority unfunded needs list that an improvement there would be at least $40 million. And that location has another need right next to it identified in the document, and that's the Rex Whitten Expressway. You'd have to sort of look at those together to be sure that they would work and function well together because there are needs there, and that need is about $53 million. And so you can see that it's a really large-scale need, and and it's complex. You got 3 major highways converging in basically the same area. You've got about 86,000 vehicles a day coming through that general area, and it's right up against a river. and it's in the heart of Jefferson City, and there's a number of businesses and development around it. So, the solution will be a complex solution too, and so it's not something that could be developed overnight, but it is certainly it's on the forefront of what the needs are, and local leaders and certainly MODOT is interested in being able to address that.
Tri-level in Jefferson City, front and center this morning. It's always been pain in my rear end, and 5-hour traffic jam following an accident there has kind of heightened the conversation regarding what do we do about that. Marchelle Watkins, Central District Engineer with MODOT, is joining us this morning on Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Marchelle, you guys do have a project to do some bridge deck work and all that, about $280,000 for the tri-level. You talk about that and maybe what that may do to traffic in the short term.
That's really about taking care of the bridges that are already there. And so we always plan our work to minimize impact to the traveling public, especially in those areas that have a lot of traffic. So we try to work with the contractor to be sure that the work that they do is off-peak hours and that sort of thing. We also have in our program coming up a project just north of the bridge. And, anytime any of these locations, these feeders that come into the tri-level have an incident on them, it can back up for a significant distance because they all converge, right? And it hits all three of them when it happens. But we do have a project north of the bridge that adds an additional lane from the Missouri River Bridge up to Route 63. And so what that will allow for is if there are incidents in that area, it allows traffic to still travel through and move around it, and will have less impact timing-wise to the people who are coming through that location too. So hopefully that will alleviate some of the problems, but certainly it doesn't address all of them.
So this morning, can we say, okay, so you said we've got to have money specifically for that project, its location, it's next to all these things. Is there any sense of a time frame? Like we say, the tri-level area that could be fixed, or we'll have a plan for that within 2 years, within 5 years? Is there somebody listening this morning who's crossing the tri-level into Jefferson City, coming out of Jefferson City during rush hour? Anything that we can point to those people this morning going, hey, listen, here's some relief. It's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now.
Well, each year we update our construction program, also known as the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP, and we look at the funds that we project to have available over a 5-year period. And then we look at the 3 documents that I just told you. What are the unfunded needs? What are our asset management needs? What are our safety needs? And we begin programming projects. So each year we take a look at that in terms of the available funding that's coming in and which of those needs are the highest ones and which ones we can move forward with. The key on the timing of the study is to not get too far in advance of having funding to construct it, because then the ideas and suggestions and planning gets out of date before you can deliver it. So we do kind of look at that horizon each year and figure out how we can weave in some planning studies and weave in some of the projects that will be included in the program.
Okay, so basically the answer is no, we can't offer a time frame this morning.
Not yet, but again, we review it every fall or winter, spring time frame as we're developing our next construction program, and it is an important need in the Central Missouri region.
I'll tell you, what sticks out to me is the number here, and the fact that this $53 million Rex Whitten Expressway would have to be done with that as well. So again, that number, that's new. The mayor thought the number would be 15 to 25. Obviously, we had inflation, probably concrete costs. So I'm a little surprised at the number, but I'm glad to know that.
Marchelle Watkins, MODOT Central District Engineer. We're appreciative of your time this morning here on Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Thank you.
All right. Chris, I didn't mean to do that. I was waiting. I thought maybe she had already hung up. I have a bad habit of doing that. Please know.
Especially this week. Jeez.
Yeah. We hung up on Governor Parson last week.
I did do that. We did that.
We hung up twice on him, in effect. Hannah hung up on him before the governor came on, and then when he was done, I hung up too early. I didn't know he was done talking, and we hung up on somebody else. I did not apologize. I said, hey, we appreciate you coming on. And then silence, and I'm thinking, okay, you're done. And then as soon as the end, John, Then as soon as the interns go to hang the phone up, because, we roll high here on Wake Up Mid-Missouri. We're on YouTube, on our YouTube channel at Wake Up Mid-Missouri. We're on Facebook, so we're high rollers here. We don't operate these phones.
I think it's ironic, though, that you didn't hang up on the angry caller yesterday while you hosted the Gary Dolan show.
Oh, no, he was getting good content out of that, John.
Oh, man. Yesterday, we had Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft was on, and he was on in his role as Secretary of State. And so there are some things you got to be careful about you cover with somebody who's in office when they're running for another office. You got to book it differently through a campaign if you want to talk about their gubernatorial candidacy. And this guy, we had Jay on, Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, and we had, I thought, a great conversation. As a matter of fact, I thought a really impressive conversation. I've been chatting with folks from his office yesterday and today. We're still texting about the conversation because Jay Ashcroft, we were relating it to what Joe Biden said in Hawaii. Well, I almost lost the Corvette and the cat, and talking about it's not about you. Not just in politics as an elected servant, but even on a personal level, living your life to do this. What can I do for other people instead of always going around and thinking about me? And I thought Mr. Ashcroft and I had a really personal, really good conversation. Not everybody.
Not everyone agreed.
Not everybody agreed. Maybe we'll highlight exactly what Jay Ashcroft said, and then the caller who did not agree with that assessment on things. We might do that coming up 8:35 this morning. Meanwhile, I'm getting stoked. I'm going to hop on my bad motor scooter. I'm going to ride, take a break, come back, and see what John has for us. And that would be all, except for this. What can we look forward to?
The elephant in the room and the little green man.
All right, the Republicans in
The Dow higher by 184 points, the S&P 500 up 48, the NASDAQ higher by 215.
Coming up at 8:25, we'll look at your futures just minutes before the stock market opens. And the big story this morning, Morning Bell, business news, little twist only Stephanie Bell can give you. She'll be back in studio tomorrow morning. She was at the debate last night in Wisconsin. Earlier this morning on the show, I thought gave some really interesting analysis because she had kind of a different take on things. Being there than kind of what me and Hannah and John Marsh happen to have this morning. Coming up in the Morning Bell this morning, two things in the financial world, two things that haven't happened in 20 years. So what are those two things? We'll do that at 8:25.
And that would be all, except for this.
The elephant in the room and the little green men. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie appeared to be thrown off by being the only candidate last night at the debate who was asked about UFOs. You might remember Martha McCallum asked Christie, said, what would you do if you were the president and level with Americans on our encounters with extraterrestrials? And she added more people taking the concept of UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, seriously following the congressional hearings, to which the former governor replied, so I get the UFO question. Then he jokingly said that McCallum asked him the question because they're both from New Jersey. And he said, especially coming from a woman from New Jersey, I think it's horrible that just because I'm from New Jersey, you asked me about unidentified flying objects and Martians. And he said, we're different, but we're not that different. And I don't appreciate your Tony Soprano lookalike comments. No, I didn't say that, but that's the rest of that story.
How about that? And that was, I think, the rare moment that maybe Chris Christie elicited any kind of somewhat positive response.
They laughed instead of booed like they did for the rest of the debate when he got to talk.
If I were Chris Christie, I would have said this. I'm like, oh, man, I finally got people not booing at me. Throw some Bigfoot questions at me. Let's talk about the Loch Ness Monster, Brett Baer. Martha asked me about these things. You may have gotten some more positive responses. Randy Tobler. He was the Randy Tobler Show. Really cool show in the afternoon. The guy's very smart. And the thing I love about Randy Tobler is he can take some of these very heady topics and then kind of explain them to me like we're 2 years old. But he forgets, like when Randy and I chat in person, he starts talking in doctor terms and stuff.
He does.
And I'm like, and it's one of those when somebody says, you know what I'm talking about, Brandon? I'm like, I sure do. Really good show. He's here this afternoon, 4 to 6 on the radio station. The other thing we might want to do, I want to highlight because we've been talking about, and it seems the general consensus, Hannah, for you, it was clear.
Yes.
Last night. Marsh, clear.
Pretty much.
For me, clear. We're all in agreement. Vivek Ramaswamy exceeded my expectations. My big question yesterday going into the debate was, yeah, he's great. He's polished on those TV interviews, and he politely really discounted what an LGBTQ activist had to say by bringing up facts, and he was polite, and I think he shows because politics, and listen, I will always fess up. You can accuse me of being too optimistic sometimes, but you know what? I'll own it. But kind of in line with the conversation that we had with our Secretary of State yesterday, Jay Ashcroft, about standing firm for what you believe, but doing it with love. Jay Ashcroft said those words here on the radio station yesterday. Vivek Ramaswamy has that ability, and he has done it, and that's why I think he is doing as well as he has. But my big concern, you're great on the TV, and you got some of these great viral moments where you're not necessarily even trying to go viral. Can you do it when you're debating some of your fellow political opponents? And by and large, largely exceeded my expectations. I was chatting with somebody yesterday and said, well, what about him taking the scholarship money from the brother of George Soros years ago? And Vivek Ramaswamy is saying, yeah, I took the money, wouldn't you? But apparently he was already a millionaire. But the point being from this listener yesterday on the radio station, well, what about his ties to George Soros on that? And the first thing I thought, well, for example, I mean, look at how much Eric Greitens, when he was elected governor, how much of the vote he carried here in Missouri. Now, we know that Eric Greitens was a former Democrat. I'm guessing somewhere in there, there were ties to somebody like that. And the point being, sometimes people evolve and they grow and you get new information and you change your mind. Like tomorrow, I thought, man, I'm going to come into work with a parka and some gloves. I got new information. It's not going to be as cooler tomorrow as I thought. So I've evolved on that opinion. I've changed my mind. Hot tomorrow, 100. I have 109 here on a Feel Good Friday. Tobler is next. The other thing we want to do as it relates to the debate, Hannah and Marsh and I are all in agreement on who we thought was a clear-cut winner. And I might have, Hannah taught me all about confirmation bias several years ago, so maybe there's some of that. But I think we're all clear-cut. In our opinion, it was Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, Stephanie Bell, who was there and called in this morning, had kind of a different take, but I think that could be interesting because she was there. It's like going to a hockey game. People are like, they're not fans of hockey because they watch it on TV. You go to a game, a little bit of a different take. Tobler is here, hosts the afternoon show weekdays starting at 4 o'clock here on the radio station. Your take after watching the debate last night?
My number one take home, Brandon, is, man, it's like a manager that has 7 outfielders and they can only play 3 of them at once. I mean, it was great to see principle being expressed over and over with a little difference around some of the edges. There was the Ukraine issue and others, but I mean, I was just glad to see, for the most part, everyone in their own way expressed, we need a return to conservatism. We need to close the border. Bidenomics is a disaster. I heard a lot of things from all the candidates, and frankly, I thought, my goodness, if there's not a Republican, anyone on that stage, anyone that can't beat Joe Biden, all is lost in this country. Might as well move to Cyprus.
And here's the other thing I wish they would quit. It's a GOP primary debate. Y'all believe Bidenomics sucks. Joe is old. Joe has lost his mind. Joe needs to go. We know all of that. And that's where I get a little frustrated. Like, well, we know this. Let's not talk about the gems. This is the GOP primary debate. You're not debating a Democrat. You share that same sense?
Yeah, I share it, but I think that it's important. What I was thrilled about was that, yes, I mean, I think we all know those things, but it was refreshing to me to hear that, yeah, there was the back and forth, and they went after Ramaswamy, which tells you they're scared of Ramaswamy. But the fact that, they all are reminding GOP voters, like, look, we all agree on the same thing. It's a matter who can deliver the message. The message is established clearly. And I think there's also going to be a lot of moderates that watch these debates too. And that's what I mean about hearing this consistent thread. I didn't get a chance to hear Stephanie, but I came in with super hot, how you talked about confirmation bias. Sometimes you have over exuberant expectations. And as I watched Ramaswamy getting pummeled, I think that he's going to need a little coaching and watch a few tapes of how Donald Trump handles that. Trump most often will just sort of raise an eyebrow like, whatever, or he'll stand there and look very stern and just look like the warrior. And I think that sometimes Ramaswamy looked like the schoolboy who was at the top of the class and the other kids were trying to make fun of something he wore that day, and he would have that sort of silly little smile. I think if he changes just a little bit of his body language and his facial expressions, his next debate, if you thought this was good, the next debate I would expect he's going to absolutely stun people. But overall, it was great to just see him come back and fight back. I'm glad he got his 10 truths out there at the very end. I think if he'd had a chance to drip those out and package them throughout the debate, it would have been even better. He was fantastic. And Nikki Haley, I got to give her credit, although, boy, was that sorry, Hannah, but that was a gratuitous women comment. It was just gratuitous. I mean, yeah, if you want to say something, ask a man. If you want to get it done, ask a woman. Okay, that's pandering to a portion of the base, but whatever.
And when you say to a portion of the base, you mean the chick base?
The chicks. It's a portioning. And well, by the way, what she said is true, but I think it was pandering. It was gratuitous.
All right, Randy Tobler, host the Randy Tobler Show, joining us this morning here on Wake Up Mid-Missouri. Producer Hannah, John Marsh, Brian Hausworth, and I'm Branden Rathert.
Producer Hannah and I both have the question that would probably go right to you, though, Mr. Manager, Dr. Tobler. If you were setting up, using your baseball reference, if you were setting up your batting lineup, how would you place these candidates this morning?
Yeah, that's a super question. I didn't mention DeSantis. I thought Ron DeSantis did a good job of coming out fiery. I think DeSantis, Ramaswamy, and potentially Nikki Haley would be in that mix. I mean, I was really impressed with the way they all came across. I thought they articulated their points well. They were feisty when they needed to be. I think I think in terms of their policy stance, you can argue about the Ukraine question. I don't know that there's a magic perfect answer there, frankly. I struggle with that one. But boy, just the way they were able to retort and do it effectively in the 30 or 45 seconds they had, I was impressed. Mike Pence, I thought, could have done well, but he took way too much time. When you go overtime over and over and over again, you lose points in my book.
Yeah, Hannah was not a big fan of Pence either. And my question was, who was the bigger last night? Was it Chris Christie or Mike Pence? I would have said Chris Christie. Hannah says no, it was Mike Pence. And man, he had a chance. He had a chance to do something here. He's being asked about, the presidents of a certain age, should they be taking physical and mental ability tests?
It might be a good idea to have everybody in Washington, D.C. pass a mental.
And I thought that was a great response. But then, unfortunately,
we don't need a president who's too old, and we don't need a president who's too young. We need a president who's been there.
And they got the booze because we knew that he was going after Ramaswamy.
Although I thought, I admire a person that stands by, whether they're Bernie Sanders, AOC, forget her. But I admire a person that stands by their principles, even if it's not popular. His stance and his reference to his faith is constant. Some find it overbearing. But I admire the guy that he stands by what he believes, and I think he's a principled guy. I just don't know if he's got the energy, and I think there's probably too many in the mainstream who, if you're connected too closely with the Trump orbit, even though at the end it didn't work out in terms of that Trump orbit, I think he'll be rejected by the moderates for the same reason I think Trump will be.
Gary on text says the exact same thing. Pence cannot win a general, but I admire his principle. In other words, he's principled about what he thinks and what he believes. He does not waver from that. The other thing I thought was interesting were the DNC surrogates after the show. Al Franken, Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live, from some of the few good years. He said
he should have stuck with that.
He should have, man. And quit grabbing women's breasts and then taking pictures of them, which, of course, that's why he is now disgraced former Senator Al Franken. But he was responding to something DeSantis said regarding abortions, allowing abortions up to birth. This from Al Franken: no one is trying to allow abortions right up to birth. You're an a-hole. And I have 4 pieces of audio that completely disputes what Mr. Al Franken said.
Where it's obvious that a woman is about to give birth. She has physical signs that she is about to give a birth. Would that still be a point at which she could request an abortion if she was so certified?
My bill would allow that, yes.
Okay, so that is Kathy Tran. She is a Democrat in Virginia. She's a Virginia delegate. And then we have Eric Adams, mayor of New York.
Do you think there should be any limitation on abortions?
No, I do not.
So Al Franken completely, he has it wrong on that stuff. Anything from the response on the other side that you look at and go, what are you guys talking about? That makes you scratch your head, Randy, and go, what the heck are you guys talking about?
Well, what I've seen is the chatter I've seen on social media and others is you guys are a bunch of racists because all you can talk about is the border, and you don't want to help those poor people in Ukraine. It's the same old, But I think that they're really in a tough spot in the Democrat Party. I mean, you look at that. At least 3 or 4 of those people up on that stage would be stellar presidents. Let's be honest about it. They would do a great job. And who do you have? You got tottering, teetering Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in the wings, and hairboy Newsom, who presides over the most disastrous apocalyptic state in the nation. I mean, really? Man, this is ours to lose, brother. I'm excited about ours to lose. I'm excited about it.
And then check this out. This is a DNC surrogate who happens to be from Wisconsin. Her name is Satya Rhodes Conway, talking about the economy and how bad things are. But she's a Democrat.
So I would suggest that anybody thinks that this country is in decline, come to cities. Because Democratic mayors all across the nation are creating great places where people want to be.
Has she been hitting the dispensaries in Colombia? I don't know.
Wow.
I mean, geez, where's she been?
So
wow.
we can look at the facts. There was a big hearing in San Francisco yesterday. That homeless problem in San Francisco and the problem with criminals not being prosecuted, that is starting to blow up. That, like, courts are getting involved. That's getting nasty. You look at the dwindling populations of cities like St. Louis, where the mayor is calling for a ban on certain guns. Mike Parson and Attorney General Andrew Bailey said you can't do that. It's against the Constitution. Just a real head scratch. You got about a minute here. Do you know what's coming up on your show this afternoon?
Yeah, we're going to talk to Jen Bukowski. We've got I've got Lieutenant Governor Mike Keogh on, so get to know him a little bit. I have not had the pleasure of meeting him. We'll have him on the program, and of course our usual Show Me Institute hit as well. So there'll be plenty to talk about. Not enough time as usual.
Of course, Randy Tobler. By the way, we were joking about you earlier. I just want to make sure I'm saying it to your face over the phone. We were talking about how intelligent you are, and but how you have a tendency to you can do a good job on the afternoon show of kind of explaining things so that people like me can understand. Except when you and I are hanging out in person, you start talking about some of your stuff sometimes, especially as it relates to, let's say, the big pharma industry, as it relates to how the federal government hamstrings the medical and the pharmaceutical industry.
Hey, it's Dr. Randy and his bedside manner. Cut him some slack.
Right, and I sit there and I'm like, I know what you're saying. Hey, man, I look forward to catching your show this afternoon starting at 4.
Hey, thanks, bro. It was fun.
All right, Randy Tobler, host of the Randy Tobler Show, weekdays starting at 4. Coming up 8:25, Morning Bell. 2 things have not happened for the Morning Bell. Business news with a little twist that only Stephanie Bell can give you a couple of different things we're doing today. 2 stories involving alcohol, but first let's take a look at the futures this morning. Dow is opening down. However, NASDAQ, S&P opening in the green this morning. 2 things front and center this morning here on the Morning Bell. 2 things that haven't happened in 20-plus years. Bud Light. So we've been basically since May. Whenever Bud Light sent a can of beer or a 6-pack of beer to a dude that said celebrating womanhood for a year, people said, you know what, we're just not going to drink you anymore. And month after month, their sales have continued to decline. And I hope that local distributors are doing well. Apparently, Budweiser got so bad for Budweiser, they're sending money to these local distributors. And we hope the local distributors, they're going to be okay. But we've been telling you about the falling numbers. We keep talking about Modelo, and month after month since this went down in the spring, Modelo just kept gaining on them month to month to month. Here's what's new to this story this morning. For the first time in 22 years, Bud Light will not finish as the number 1 selling beer of the year. In other words, Modelo's sales so far ahead of Bud Light's right now that for the year, there is no way that Bud Light will be number 1. Modelo Especial has officially become the best-selling beer in the United States for the entire year of 2023, knocking Bud Light from its 22-year reign in the top spot. The other thing that hasn't happened, which I think is interesting, and here's what I thought was interesting about this story. There was no, because how many boycotts have actually worked, like a call to arms kind of boycott? Very few of them really honestly ever work. And here's why I think this one worked.
Ralph Nader put the Corvair out of business, but now,
Well, besides that one, the big one, by and large, they don't work. And here's why I think this one worked. It was not a call to arms. There weren't people saying, we gotta boycott this. It wasn't that. It was basically, you had Kid Rock shooting up some Bud Light, but you didn't have anybody. You didn't see all these, we've got to boycott. It was just people personally making their own personal decisions, not necessarily getting on social media, and I'm not buying this anymore. It was just people quietly, and I say quietly because it didn't happen all at once. Here, that was May, June, July, August, almost into September. So we're talking almost half a year that it's continued to drop for specifically Bud Light because people are just quietly saying, you know what, I'm not buying it anymore. I think, in my opinion, that's why it's worked, because enough people were just like, this is silly.
And you do feel bad for the distributors because they had no control over this. And back in the days when Fleshman Hilliard was the big PR firm for Budweiser for years and years and years, you would think they had enough grasp on their market that they wouldn't have pulled a stunt like this.
That's what you would think, too. And what happened there is, so they hire somebody, their marketing director, who happened to be from Brooklyn, and she apparently is a progressive. She was from Brooklyn, New York. And then she said, hey, let's hire a firm from San Francisco, which, if we're stereotyping, they're paying a whole bunch of progressive to come up with marketing campaigns. And somebody thought, well, this is going to be a good idea. And we know now, and people that are without jobs that had been working for Bud Light, they know too now that it was not bad. So the other thing, first time it's happened in 20-plus years. One U.S. market expert echoing concerns about some of the nation's top real estate industries after the fixed mortgage rates up to 7%, highest they've been in some 20 years. So you have these 2 stories that are really, I guess, affecting people. They're affecting Bud Light and these homes, these mortgage rates, highest they've been in 20 years. Bidenomics on the mortgage rates. Right. Coming up 8:35. Want to highlight one of the things said on CNN last night regarding how Joe Biden is doing with the economy, because perception from people I find fascinating. The other thing we're going to do, we had a statewide elected servant on the show yesterday, very personal and effective conversation that really didn't have a whole lot to do with politics. That was a great conversation. Not everybody agreed. Hear that moment on the show. That's coming up 5 minutes.
campaign thus far has focused on the economy. It does not appear to work. Why?
CNN talking to the DNC chair. Why is this not working? The answer is what we're after here, because it's phenomenal. Welcome to the show. It's Wake Up Mid-Missouri. I am Branden Rathert. There's producer Hannah and John Marsh. Brian Hausworth is here, too. Tomorrow, Feel Good Friday. Stephanie Bell is going to be back in the studio. She's going to be joining us. We'll do winners and losers of the week. And it's interesting. She had a very different take on the debate than what we did, because it seems like Marsh and Hannah and I and a lot of folks, by the way, USA Today, Washington Post, some even the progressive publications are saying, yeah, it was Ramaswamy. I thought it was pretty impressive. But Stephanie Bell had a really interesting take. As a matter of fact, later today, you'll be able to go back and check out the podcast when we get those posted. She was in the 6 o'clock hour. She was there. I thought that was kind of interesting. So perception and reality. Here's the DNC chair talking about CNN. And the anchor said, here's the numbers, man. It's not, you guys are saying the economy is good. The overwhelming majority, 63% of Americans are saying, no, it's not good. Why is that?
You just got to keep going out there, making sure that people connect the good things that are going on with the president.
Like what? David Tyson Smith, local rep. He's a Democrat. He's going to be hanging out with us in studio next Wednesday. I'm excited for this, John. David Tyson Smith, he's a nice dude. We agree on very little politically. But I'm excited about this. We finally have a date. It's something we've been kind of working on for a while, and now we have a date next Wednesday morning, 7:30. He's going to join us for about half an hour, and we're just going to say, okay, so, David, can you help us with this? You're a Democrat. Why is it you have, like, the DNC chair saying, well, the things are good? Why is it that you have, like, former Labor Secretary Robert Reich saying this is the best economy that I've seen in 30 years? Why are these people saying these things, Mr. David Tyson Smith? Just, explain to us. It's not going to be a debate. It's not about a battle. It's just trying to, okay, let's try to learn. So David Tyson Smith in studio next Wednesday, 7:30, to just talk about,
Fantastic.
Yeah, because that's, I think, part of the problem. As a matter of fact, Jay Ashcroft and I had a conversation about this yesterday. I want to highlight that because I thought it was really, really good. And I'm not saying because of what I said, but because of what Secretary of State said. Not everybody agreed with the perception of that conversation on the show. That was the next thing. We're going to cover that. But, John, I just think it's an interesting opportunity to sit with the Democrat in a polite fashion and say, okay, why?
Hats off to him for coming on.
Well, and I think I agree. And, Branden, I heard you extend the invitation to him out at the I-70 bill signing ceremony. I was standing right there, and he was very receptive. There's one thing that ties in with what you invited him that I think is worth mentioning. And John will remember, it's from a different era, but it became a news story for me because Representative Tyson Smith has led the effort on the Democratic side to have Republicans and Democrats actually have meals together at the Capitol. Now, people are shocked that we say that would even be a thing. Years ago, they'd all go out to dinner together. Nobody thought anything of it. But in this polarizing environment, it has changed. And there are people on both sides of the aisle, on both parties, that don't want to eat with the other side. But David Tyson Smith's trying to do that. He does represent a lot of our listeners. That if they need help on a constituent service issue, he's always tries to be receptive to. He's my state representative. I can tell you his constituent service is very good. Has nothing to do with any politics, and I'm glad he's coming in.
Yeah.
Last time we had him on, I think he was at the governor's prayer breakfast with us. Wasn't he, Brian?
Yes, that's correct.
And to speak to the humanity of this guy, because that's the thing we forget. And listen, we saw this in the debate last night. Everybody attacking each other, but then whenever whenever Donald Trump emerges as the GOP nominee, they're all going to get together, and Nikki and Tim and Vivek and Ron, they're all going to hang out together, and they're going to chummy up, and they're going to be friends. Where last night they were not friends. Jay Ashcroft yesterday was doing the Gary Nolan show. Gary Nolan is back here, I think, Monday. Today, really cool guest hosting for Gary Nolan, Steve Spellman, who writes for the Missourian, very active in local politics. There's his latest, one of the pieces he wrote recently was Try That in a Small Town. And he traveled to small towns like Versailles and Mexico and Centralia and just talking about some of the cool things that happen in small towns. He's filling in on Gary's show today. Yesterday, I was on, Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft was on, and we talked about, we were talking about Joe Biden, what he said in Hawaii about, I almost lost my Corvette, and how, it's not about you, Joe. Besides it just being a horribly political move, it was incredibly impersonal and callous to say that to people who at least 100+ people have died. And we also were talking about Mr. Ramaswamy and that viral moment that he had with the transgender activist who asked him, well, what do you think about this? And he said, well, here's what I think, and don't cram it down my throat. And it just doesn't make sense. And she tried to get into him again, and he didn't bite. And that's one of the things that Mr. Ashcroft and I got to talking about was, hey, we can have these disagreements. And what he said, I just thought it was really cool. And then also, and you'll hear it here, I thought the other thing that was really cool, he said, not just in politics is about being of service. What can I do for other people? But on a personal level, in living our daily lives, if I think more, what can I do for other people? Here's part of that exchange.
He is somewhat outspoken about the truth and saying, hey, do you really realize what's going on here? Then we're hiding the ball and we're not actually being polite. There's nothing wrong with speaking the truth in love, and we need more of that. And we need both more people that'll speak in love and more people that aren't afraid to speak the truth. I think the greatest calling we can have in life is not to be worried about ourselves, but to act in ways that make other people better.
And that I thought was cool, because Jay Ashcroft will tell you, Christian man. I thought it was a great conversation. However, not everybody agrees.
And I don't listen to you in your show.
There's a caller immediate right after that.
And I don't listen to you in your show earlier in the morning either. But that's the worst interview I've ever heard for a man that's running for governor. We all know what Biden says, what he's doing, but you could have let the man talk and maybe brought up some state issues. That's the absolute worst interview I've ever heard in my life.
Go on.
Well, I mean, I don't care for you in the morning, and I miss Gary Nolan today. I look forward to hearing Ashcroft.
So a couple things. In this caller, I appreciated him. Absolutely. Calling in to say, you suck. If that's your opinion, that's cool, man. Really. Okay. And I get it, man.
Can you let him talk?
Yeah. And there's more. He goes on for a while. I'll play the rest of it, but it's the same. It's you suck. And I appreciated the guy having the balls to call into a radio show and say, you really suck. Seriously, I appreciated that. But what he didn't understand, he said the man, he's running for governor of Missouri. Let's talk about Missouri issues. And what he probably did not know. When you get into those situations where you have a current office holder who then is running for another office, you have to thread the needle on how you book interviews. Here's why. Let's say, for example, you get somebody who's in a state office and they are running for another office. If we call the office, we want to get this individual, this state elected servant, onto our show, get them on in their role, whatever statewide elected office they're in, and then they come on to campaign for the next job. You cannot do that. Correct. Because, in effect, you are using taxpayer dollars. We hear about the Hatch Act and Karine Jean-Pierre all the time.
Right.
And he didn't know, which is fine. But I was kind of surprised because of the personal nature of the conversation with a sitting politician.
No, I think, Branden, first of all, I give you credit. You could have cut him off, and others would have cut him off. You allowed him to speak. In his defense, he obviously didn't know, and you're exactly right. And for people that think you're blowing it out of proportion, that you're talking about using state resources. Those of you who think Branden's blowing it out of proportion, I'd ask you to Google William Webster, 1993, the Missouri Attorney General. John, am I correct?
Yep, Bill Webster.
He
Roe v. Wade, if you want to talk about Bill Webster's legacy.
He went down gubernatorial candidate, probably would have been Mel Carnahan beat him handily after Webster was under investigation by 2 grand juries, ended up being indicted.
Ended up serving time.
In federal prison, and it all boiled down essentially to a copy machine. Yes.
So he was using copy machine in his current office while...
As I'm going from memory, and then he was sentenced in St. Louis. This was right as I was graduating from college in 1993. And then the attorney made some statement outside, and the federal judge came outside, John. I don't know if you remember, the judge actually came outside and did his own press conference. That would be unheard of today, explaining why. But the bottom line is, Ashcroft remembers that, and and I guess if you had called Ashcroft's campaign office, he could. But no, the point is that your point is very well taken. But most people they don't realize that, and that's a legitimate thing.
Trey Fauché, president of the Mizzou College Republicans, because the joke here, my dad's favorite show, Gary Nolan show, coming up at 9. Trey Fauché, Mizzou College Republican president, texted me during the show and said, "If your dad's favorite show is the Gary Nolan show, is it still his favorite show if you're the one hosting it?" That made my mind spin, man. Coming up.
Good job, bud.
And then we called and had the big guy on the show and said, "Dad, do you agree with this guy?"
The leftovers. Enjoy.
New law goes into effect on Monday, and you'll only want to pay attention to this story if you drive and if you have a cell phone. If you don't drive a car and you don't have a cell phone, don't worry about this story. It ain't going to affect you.
Probably don't have a radio either.
This one ain't going to affect you. Hand-free driving law goes into effect on Monday on a statewide level. Now, this has been in effect in at least one of our mid-Missouri cities for a while now. Columbia, as a matter of fact, I'll never forget Michael Trapp was a councilman in Columbia at the time, and we said, come on, this is just window dressing. You can't. He said, no, we're serious about you can't hold a cell phone and drive. I said, Mr. Trapp, come on, you guys aren't going to enforce, there's nothing you can do to enforce this. You're not going to. And he eventually, I think we had to press 3 times, and he finally said, yep, this is just window dressing. As a matter of fact, somebody from Missouri State Highway Patrol is going to be joining us on Monday morning show to talk about this new law. New law goes into effect Monday, makes it illegal for you to hold your phone while driving. There are some caveats, though, when it comes to enforcing the law. And listen, I agree. It is a wonderful idea. I have friends. I have friend in my inner circle. I got one friend. And people, when I know they're texting and driving, I get a little like, hey, man, I know you're driving and texting right now.
No, wait a second. Uh-oh. You do the same thing.
But I know how to do it. I'm the only one in Missouri that can.
Yeah, you can drive with your knee as well.
That's right. I'm the only one that's good at it. Everybody else, I'll throw it. That law goes into effect on Monday. There are some caveats and kind of a grace period, too. Marsh, what you got for leftovers?
The pizza wagon is on its way home. We have it on good authority that Shakespeare's Pizza had their delivery vehicle stolen from the West Broadway location. It has now been found in St. Louis County. And the St. Louis County police spokesman talked to ABC 17, our news partner, said the vehicle was found there on Fowler Avenue. No one and no pizzas were in the vehicle when it was found.
And the best part of that story is this vehicle has stickers all up and down the side of it. It's so obvious that it belongs to this business. It's not inconspicuous.
Made it from Shakespeare's Pizza all the way over into St. Louis. And that's some of your leftovers before we do indeed get into my dad's favorite show.
The Emos guys maybe grabbed it or something.
Try delivering pizzas now, guys. Try delivering that Shakey's Pizza now. Gary Nolan Show coming up. Today, guest co-host is going to be Steve. Guest host, I should say, is going to be Steve Spellman. You hear him oftentimes here on Wake Up Mid-Missouri because he knows politics, knows local stuff here in Mid-Mo. Great piece I was talking about earlier in the Missouri and Try That in a Small Town. He travels some small towns, Centralia, Mexico, Versailles, and just interesting stories about things that happen in our small towns here in Mid-Missouri.
Yeah, but I'll be filling in for the big guy here the next 3 hours.
My dad's the big guy. My dad, I'm Hunter Biden. My dad's, the big guy. He actually, the big guy came on the show yesterday, John.
Yes, he did.
Because we had a caller who was not very pleased.
And you related the tale of taking the gigantic Dodge out when you weren't supposed to one night.
Yeah, my dad misses Gary, too. Cricket says, at the end of the conversation with my dad here on the radio station, he says, by the way, when's Gary back?
Yeah,
he's back on.
Might be a little disappointed today as well. But we'll try to carry the baton and everything. But we got federal, we got state, we got local in the third hour there as well. But yeah, presidential stuff, everybody's a buzz about that. But the big guy, Gary Nolan, that big guy, he's big old libertarian. So we're going to kind of take that angle, a little different angle than maybe you've been hearing otherwise so far.
Incidentally, if you're watching, if maybe you stand up just a little bit since you're on camera on our Wake Up Mid-Missouri YouTube channel, wearing a Gary Johnson 2012 shirt, and it's a biker's shirt.
Yeah, I rode bikes with him in Iowa in 2011. Went up there for Ragbri, the big race right across Iowa, and one of the more inspiring Libertarian Party candidates. That doesn't say maybe a whole lot, frankly, but
you know what you should do.
What should I do?
Here's what you should do, Steve. Since I'm the only one that knows how to text and drive safely at the. Just block out the Johnson for president and just cover everything up except the words that say Gary. That's how you do it on the Gary Nolan Show. What else you got coming up today?
Very good.
And
You
why are
distracted him.
Whoa, what
Why
else?
are you doing this?
Oh,
Why are you grabbing your?
You might find an old Gary Nolan for President T-shirt from back in the day.
They are around. I've got several things from back in the day. But the second hour we're going to have state level stuff. We're going to have Dave Stokes from the Show Me Institute. He is super, talking about property taxes and so forth. The wonderful Ron Calzone, a great American. Missouri First. He's going to be the second half of the second hour. And then for local folks here, the third hour in Columbia, Mike Murphy at Como Buzz is going to be on there. There is just some outrageous stuff coming out of Columbia City Hall. So we'll be talking about that. So good stuff.
That publication that Mike Murphy is doing now is pretty cool. You also used to, I think it was Jefferson City Buzz or JC Buzz.
There for a while and converted to this. Yeah.
And it was, man, this guy, he is.
Real journalism, real local stuff, and asking the right questions.
Yeah, and when it comes to print journalism, we don't see a whole lot of that anymore. I mean, those questions that, let's say, a college grad out of journalism going into a local paper, those questions they don't want to ask, and he's really good. He's really good about that. So, some of the things we are looking forward to on the Gary Nolan Show, as hosted by Steve Spellman tomorrow here on Wake Up Mid-Missouri. We are going to be celebrating a Feel Good Friday. So today we picked winners and losers of the debate. For the folks who took part in the debate, my mind